I'm really happy to be here. Yesterday I was speaking at this thing in Prague, Forum 2000, and there were like lots of really important people there. Like I was like probably one of the only speakers who wasn't wearing a tie and a suit and looking important. And but here I'm really getting the sense that this is where the important stuff is happening. Because the people at Forum 2000 are so, I mean, maybe individually, independently, they're thinking radical thoughts and stuff, but they're locked in a situation in which they can't really do very much. And very often they're locked in a way of thinking as well that's enforced by their environment. So like the real, radical new ideas can't happen there, but they can happen here. And there's another logic that governs, another logic or another causality that governs reality that is invisible to our old way of seeing. Another matrix of cause and effect that enables us to accomplish the impossible, or things that our old understanding of cause and effect says are impossible. Our old story of how the world works says things don't work that way. So I guess talking about I'm going to talk about story a little bit, because as an infrastructure for peace, I'm a storyteller, really. I'm not really too fond of abstract conceptual systems, although Victoria's, like, that is so useful to me. Like, that's one that I'm really feeling attracted to. I'm going to write my next book is probably going to be on development, and I'm thinking it could be called Decolonizing Development. Because I've been reading, in my research, I've been reading some kind of, very academic, almost sometimes impenetrable postmodernist critiques of development. And so my job is to translate that and to tell a story. The world is built on stories. All of our social reality is a story. A nation is a story, money is a story, an organization is a story. And these stories go all the way to an unconscious level, to the level that we could call a mythology. We live in a story today in which war and violence are inevitable. They're built into the story that we have that answers the basic questions of life. And they're built into our perceptions. When we're immersed in that story, when that story lives inside of us, and when we live inside that story, we see the world in a way that causes violence to happen around us, that causes us to perpetrate violence unconsciously, whether we know it or not. And what's changing today? What's that?
Just the terminology where you phrased it. That might be the point you're getting to, but I can't hear that. I mean, it needs a clarification. You see, the world is like that, but it's not for me.
Okay.
It's just a question of terminology, the way I see it. But you can't say my world is made of violence and war with me coming along and listening to that. It's not the only reality in my world.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, let me clarify about we. I'm talking about industrial civilization. I'm not talking about the indigenous. I'm not talking about every person in industrial civilization. But I have found that part of the story that we are transitioning, we as a culture are transitioning out of, is a story of separation, in which we think, and we've been told in a million ways, that we are separate individuals in a world of other. And as we awaken from that, as I awaken from that, I learn that actually any mind form, any belief system, any perception that exists in any human being also exists in me, because we are not actually separate individuals. We are mirrors of each other. So any relationship that I have is any interaction that I have. A man standing up and saying something, what's your name? Christoph, saying something, and then I feel an emotional reaction, and the habit that I've been given is to other you, and to make you into an opponent, when actually you're giving voice to something inside myself. And so this, anyway, but I hope that clarifies what I mean by we. But also to say, in some sense, maybe it is in all of us. Because if it's in any of us, then it is in all of us. Because who we are is not what our story has told us. That we are separate individuals, and that therefore what you're experiencing is separate from what I'm experiencing. And so this, to the extent that anybody is inhabited by this, I'll call it the story of separation, which, again, kind of goes back to Descartes. I mean, it actually goes back thousands of years, or even tens of thousands, but Descartes articulated it very clearly. That says, who you are is this mind, this point of consciousness inside of a flesh robot. Religion agrees, in general. Who you are is a soul encased in flesh. Psychology, a mind encased in flesh. Biology, selfish genes that program you to maximize reproductive self-interest. Physics, a mass, interacting with other masses according to deterministic laws, et cetera, et cetera. Obsolete physics, obsolete biology, obsolete psychology, and obsolete religion. But that's what we've grown up in. Most of us. But in this room, some people have not grown up in that. That story is changing today. And I don't have a whole lot of time to go through the whole development of the story and the crisis that it's given birth to, this birth crisis that is propelling us into a new and ancient world. But because I want to say just one or two very practical things. How can we participate in this change? How can we change the psychic infrastructure, or the narrative infrastructure, the infrastructure of stories that generates so much of the world around us? One way to do that, a lot of the ways that we try to do that in general secretly perpetuate the old story. Earlier I talked about the war on evil, which comes from this story that's becoming obsolete. Overcoming the bad guy, changing the world through force. I mean, that's the matrix of cause and effect that Cartesian, or actually maybe Galilean, Newtonian physics has taught us, that the way the world changes is you exert a force on something. And if you don't exert a force on something, then nothing changes. And who has the most force in this world anyway? But that's part of the old story. Anyway, so to change the, so I have an alternative, a suggestion. I still have 5 whole minutes left. Wow, I was starting to hurry here. Good. I have an alternative suggestion, which it's twofold. One is to disrupt the existing story, and 2 is to offer a new story. So to disrupt the existing story, this infrastructure of social reality, you can offer people an experience that doesn't fit into that story. Usually it doesn't work to overcome that story by force, to say you're wrong, here's the evidence, and here's the logic, and you're just going to have to succumb to that. That's, I'm going to overpower you. You can try that with somebody, but in fact, usually they'll retreat into their existing beliefs and hold them even more strongly. Like that's what you do probably, and that's what I do. If someone comes to you and says, you know what, you believe in climate change? Well, that's wrong, and they give you 50 pieces of evidence, because they've done all this reading about how climate change isn't happening, and if it is, it's not caused by human beings. Do you change your mind? Yes, you're right. I will change. No, you run back to the internet and you look up somebody who disagrees with them and take refuge in this story. So our stories don't actually come from evidence and logic. Our stories are attracted to a state of being, and our state of being is changing now. So when you want to change other people's stories and change the world, because the world is built on stories, you have to offer not logic, but an experience that doesn't fit. So I'll tell you a story that is an example of that, a peace-related story. It's about my friend. He didn't tell it to him, myself. A common acquaintance told me the story about my friend, brother Pancho Ramos Steerl. Does anyone know him? He's in Oakland, yeah. Really neat, really great guy. And so he moved into the worst part of Oakland, gang territory. In fact, it's at the border of 4 gangs, including the police, which is the worst gang of all. But it's at the border of gang territory. And so he goes in there, and everyone has bars on their windows, and everyone's afraid of each other. And he goes in there, and he just leaves his front door open. So one day he's out there, he's out in the street, and he's getting mugged. A gang of youths is, stealing his money, taking his wallet, robbing him with guns, etc. Right there, he's getting robbed on the street, and just so happens the police come up. A police car, a police car comes up, lights flashing, and the gang runs. He runs away. He's saved, right? Pancho runs with them, and they get away. They get away from the police, and he's like, and they're like, hold on, don't you understand? We're robbing you. And he says, no, you're my people. I'm with you. So, okay, so he keeps following him around. And then they're like, what do we have to do to make you go away? He says, you have to shake my hand. That is a disruption of the story. That his response to them did not fit into their story of the world, their story of how human beings behave. He was resisting or refusing to step into the story of these scary guys are bad. And by holding them in a different story, he offered an invitation to them to step into a different story and to be peaceful. And people are coming to rob their house, and they walk out as peace workers. This is way more powerful than overcoming them by force, having lots of police to protect everybody and to make them stop being violent. And this is just an example of how we can build an architecture for peace on the level of story. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. And I hate to break it to you, but I think I've started writing your book on development. But maybe we can write it together. Okay, any tweets for Charles? Over here. Quick.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. It's just a precision about Descartes. I think Descartes has been misunderstood, and the story that's being told about Descartes is just part of the story. He's become an icon of modern society with I think, therefore I am. And Descartes has been reduced to this, but he went further on his way. I'm not a specialist. I think it comes in the metaphysical meditations, where he comes with I am, I exist, which is beyond thought, which you could call it witness consciousness. The story about Descartes that has been recorded is just a modernist reduction of what he was.
Interesting. Maybe we can talk about that a little in the conversation.